JANZZ.technology, the podcast.
Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode. Today, back to the future. And no, we are not jumping into a DeLorean and heading back to the 1980s. But we are going back to something essential, something many AI projects have overlooked in the race for scale and speed, semantics. I'm Laura Flamaric, your host, and luckily, I'm joined today by Stefan Vincent-Ried, the CEO of JANZZ.technology, who's here to help us break it all down.
Hi Laura, thanks for having me again. And I deeply regret that we are not jumping on this DeLorean and heading back to the 1980s. But I think this title really captures where we are right now in AI. We are realizing that to make AI truly intelligent, we have to go back to the basics, semantics, structured knowledge, and ontologies.
Right. It is funny, everyone's been talking about next-gen AI, an AI that feels more intelligent, more human-like, and more capable of generalizing across tasks. But what is the reality?
Intelligence isn't just about knowing as much as possible. If it were, then the most intelligent person would simply be whoever has the greatest amount of knowledge. Think of brilliant minds like Einstein. What made him truly intelligent wasn't just the facts he knew, but his deep understanding and the knowledge and how he applied it. That's why, despite all the excitement around large language models and machine learning, many have lost sight of the fact that real intelligence starts with understanding.
That's totally right. And recently, we are seeing a clear shift, a return to those fundamental principles. In fact, Stefan, this is something you and JANZZ.technology have been focused on for over a decade, right?
Yes, at JANZZ.technology we began building our comprehensive labor market ontology called JANZZ back in 2008. We have published an article called Lost in Big Data that appeared in several scientific magazines and an ILO report in 2016. Now, many years later, organizations are beginning to realize that the true power of AI doesn't lie in the model itself, but in the worldview it's trained to understand and apply.
Right. And if we look back, it's not hard to see how we got here. When machine learning started gaining momentum around the year 2000, the widespread belief was that every decision a computer could make would eventually be solved within a smart algorithm. So naturally, companies began pouring money into developing more complex models, hoping to stumble on the next big breakthrough in AI. The thinking was, just feed the machine enough data and it will figure everything out. But as we've seen, that approach has real limits.
Yes, exactly. And trillions later, models still can't truly distinguish between a nurse and a nursing professor, or between a Kreditorenbuchhalter in German and an accounts payable clerk in English. The problem isn't the model size. It is the absence of structure and semantics. These systems are just guessing very quickly and very confidently, but still guessing. It's a bit like when we were at school trying to answer a question we weren't sure about. Sometimes we guessed, hoping to get lucky. And while the model's outputs can seem impressive, they're often just lucky guesses, surface level and unreliable. For real understanding, you need context, you need logic, you need meaning. That's what ontologies provide.
Totally. So let's take a quick step back and cover the basics. What exactly is an ontology?
That's a tough question. When people hear ontology, they often think of something technical or academic, but it's quite intuitive. Think of it as a set of rules or a blueprint for how to describe things in a specific area of knowledge.
Right. Let's take an example from healthcare, for instance.
So in healthcare systems, an ontology will define the kinds of things that exist, like diseases, symptoms, treatments, and drugs, and how they relate to one another. It tells you that a disease can have symptoms, that drugs can treat diseases, and so on. It sets up the structure.
Got it. And what would the knowledge graph be in this context?
Using the structure we just talked about, we can now plug in real-world data. For example, consider the disease diabetes and its variants and subtypes. We can state facts like diabetes is a disease. Blurred vision is one of many potential symptoms of diabetes, and insulin treats diabetes. But it's not that simple. Blurred vision can also be a symptom of another disease. So just because someone has blurred vision doesn't necessarily mean they have diabetes.
Of course, blurred vision can also be a symptom of many other diseases. But I guess the more you relate it with other symptoms or information, the better we can understand the likelihood that blurred vision is related to diabetes in a given case.
Correct. The relationship between these concepts are very complicated. Following the example, blurred vision often appears alongside other symptoms like excessive thirst or fatigue. By connecting these symptoms, the ontology helps clarify how they relate to different diabetes types and stages. Treatment options also vary. Metformin, for instance, is commonly used to treat milder form of type 2 diabetes. It's inexpensive, taken orally, and belongs to a class of drugs called biagonaids. Metformin works differently than insulin. It primarily reduces glucose production in the liver rather than supplementing insulin levels. This distinction is important because type 2 diabetes often involves the liver producing too much glucose rather than a lack of insulin.
Okay, that was a whole new level of complexity. It really shows how much more useful AI becomes when it actually understands the context of each piece of information. Should we dive into why the ontology is so necessary in HR tech? Maybe with a use case from our ontology?
Of course, let's take an example from JANZZ.technology. Our ontology defines concepts like occupation, skill, education, experience level, and all kinds of relationships like requires, is related to, is a specialization of, and so on and so on. So when we apply this structure to real-world data, magic happens, and we can do things like clearly distinguish between a woman's hairdresser and a man's hairdresser, or between singer and singing. And you may ask yourself, why I'm saying this? Why is this distinction important?
Yes, you can read my mind. Why is this so important?
Let's say you own a barbershop and you are looking for a man's hairdresser. Woman's hairdresser and men's hairdresser are subconcepts of the concept hairdresser. However, the two siblings would not automatically match with each other because in our ontology, they have been linked by a relation that we call same but different, which means they share similarities, but each is still a distinct role with its own requirements. So for example, a woman's hairdresser might have about 65% match to a barber role, close but not quite right. And the reverse, a man's hairdresser applying for a position at a high-end women's salon might only match around 40 to 45%. The direction of the match matters too, and that's the kind of nuances our ontology captures.
This is great.
Right, and this also means that each of these roles, like man's hairdresser or barber, has its own international classification codes, translations in over 60 languages, and a full set of synonyms and hierarchical relationships. The structure provides a clear contextual understanding of how each role fits within broader occupational classifications.
Aha. And because I am hiring for a barber shop, I need someone with specific barber techniques, like shaving or beard shaping, not just anyone with a general hairdressing background.
That is right, and the ontology also can differentiate complexity levels for skills. 1 being minimal training or experience, 2 requires professional training and or experience, and 3 requires extensive training and experience. Not all jobs require all levels.
So every single detail matters.
All education, training, when and where a candidate made the experiences, in which industries they were made, and how all of this relates. Not every person who can sing or has a good voice is a professional singer. That distinction depends on training, experience, performance history, and maybe even the certifications or union membership. Our ontology captures all of these complex, layered relationships. It knows that singing is not just an isolated action. It's a skill linked to anatomy, training, musical knowledge, and performance context.
Right. It's very obvious to us as humans that singing in our high school band is very different from performing at the National Opera House. But explaining that difference to a machine is far more complex. It's great that we can make these facts machine-readable and interconnected.
Yes, this is critical for things like matching job seekers with job openings, comparing qualifications across countries, or even upskilling recommendations.
I see now why the ontology is so powerful. How did you go about building something like that?
It's been a long-term effort. At JANZZ, we start building JANZZ from the ground up, completely focused on the world of work. We brought in domain experts from all kinds of backgrounds: fluid dynamics, open heart surgery, car repair, vocational systems, you name it. Take the example of a barber. If you want to model that part of the ontology with all its granularities or variations, you need one or more experienced professionals who know the field inside out and can teach that knowledge to the ontology. The same goes for welders, roofers, heat pump installers, textile engineers, and countless others. Each domain requires deep, specialized insight to ensure accurate, meaningful representation in the system.
So a broad variety of real professionals and not just scrapping the internet.
And not just using data scientists. Exactly, we didn't want surface-level definitions. There is a lot of job data online, but the vast majority of it comes from just a few regions, especially the US. So when you rely on general internet sources, you often get answers based on the most available data, and that often reflects only one country's labor market structure.
That doesn't translate to the rest of the world. Things like job titles, required skills, or even how qualifications are defined can vary dramatically between countries, industries, and languages.
Exactly. A job that exists in Germany might not exist in Chile or Kenya, or it might go by a completely different name with different qualifications.
And I guess that's especially true for languages that don't have much digital content available.
Absolutely. And that's the big problem, because if your system only understands job data in English or only from US standards, then you are excluding millions of people and countless job realities across the globe. Even if you try to translate the US-centric content, you still miss many dimensions that are crucial for further processing. In this case, the data is already biased, not in the typical sense of gender, age, or cultural bias, but biased in the terms of quality and relevance when applied in different contexts.
That sounds like a major issue. I'm not sure many people are even aware of it. Are you saying that an ontology can actually solve that?
Yes, I am. Definitely. Today, JANZZ has become the largest multilingual encyclopedic knowledge base ontology for occupation data. It covers everything that matters in labor market, from work permits and local qualifications and credentials to region-specific occupations across more than 60 languages.
That is gigantic.
Yeah, it's huge, and it keeps growing. We are talking over 2.5 billion structured nodes and relationships. But more importantly, that structure allows our AI to actually understand labor market data, context, meaning, relevance, not just process it in the most probabilistic way.
So why does this distinction matter so much?
Because semantics, the meaning layer, is the bridge between raw data and real understanding. Without semantics, AI can't reason. It can only react.
Right. Could we see an example?
Sure, if an AI encounters the word stroke, is it a medical emergency, a brush stroke, a swimming style? What about while stroking her hair, he experienced a stroke?
Well, complicated to say. It depends on the context, right?
Absolutely right. The semantics, the meaning depends entirely on the context. And the only way the system can understand that context is if the ontology defines those possible meanings and how they relate. For instance, we know that a human physician is a subconcept of the physician. The human physician must be a physician, but the physician is not necessarily also a human physician. He could be also a veterinarian. Thanks to the match correlations between parent and child concepts, the system reasons more accurately, distinguishing between similar but distinct entities and making informed decisions based on their specific attributes and roles within the ontology.
So without the semantic layer, the system can't really understand anything. It's just matching patterns blindly.
Exactly. It might guess, but it won't truly know. The ontology connects all the dots logically. It can reason across concepts like inferring that a high heart rate might indicate a stroke risk. It understands that a Facharzt in Germany is a specialist doctor and knows the specific licenses and education required. It also accounts for the jobs like surgeon in the US versus consultant surgeon in the UK, recognizing differences in titles and certifications. This deep knowledge only allows, for example, to match candidates to roles accurately, no matter where they are. Following Albert Einstein's principle, make it as simple as possible but not simpler, this statement is particularly apt when it comes to matching professions and jobs, but also skills and qualifications.
So it brings the AI system closer to the kind of real understanding we humans have, making these associations that we naturally do.
Yes, a bit like how our brain works. Ontologies define what exists within a system's universe, what is important, and what can be connected or compared.
Let's dive even deeper into that, because this is where big data and semantics come together. When people think of AI today, they often imagine massive amounts of data, what we call big data, and assume that more data automatically means more intelligence.
Yeah. Today, anyway, all data is big data. And that's a common misconception. Big data give you volume, but not meaning. Without a semantic layer, you are collecting just noise at scale.
So just having millions of resumes or job descriptions, as some companies like to claim, isn't really enough to understand the labor market, is it?
No, it's not. Definitely not. And there is another problem here. Most of these companies that boast about having millions of resumes and candidates' profiles have actually collected that data without the consent of the people it belongs to. That's the first red flag.
Absolutely. It's not just about data quality anymore. It's about trust and ethics too.
And it gets worse. Once they have the data, they often feed it into their systems without being able to verify the quality of the training data. That means they are building models on top of potentially outdated, biased, or incorrect information, and they can't explain how their system reached certain conclusions.
So the AI becomes a black box.
Exactly, and that's a serious issue when you're talking about decisions that affect real people's careers or lives. These systems are often not explainable, not auditable, and certainly not compliant with regulations like the EU AI Act, which demands transparency, fairness, and accountability, especially in high-risk areas like employment.
That really puts things into perspective.
That's the core idea behind JANZZ.technology. It's about trustworthy, explainable systems built on solid ethical foundations. We don't just collect data, we structure it, validate it, and ensure it's used in a way that's transparent, multilingual, and fully aligned with legal and ethical standards globally.
All we ask for is a system that people can trust.
Exactly. In recruitment, mistakes carry real-world consequences. A technical error is a missed opportunity. You could reject the perfect candidate or promote the wrong one. That's why such decisions must be explainable and interpretable, not left to black box AI models like LLMs. Regulations exist for very good reasons.
Absolutely, Stefan. And I imagine this only gets worse and worse as the amount of data grows.
As your data grows, the risk of semantic confusion increases. Your AI becomes a bigger, faster guesser instead of a smarter, more precise decision maker.
There's a lot of buzz about LLMs, doing everything from summarizing reports to writing code. So how do they fit or not fit into this ontology-based worldview?
That's a great question. Large language models are trained on massive data sets and are incredibly powerful at generating language. But as we explained, they don't understand the world in the way ontologies do. They recognize patterns, not logic.
Right. And for our listeners, I highly recommend checking our last episode, Why LLMs Can Hire. Alejandro put it brilliantly. It's like training a parrot. You can teach it, if I say this, you say that, again and again and again. And eventually, you hope that by teaching the parrot more and more tricks, it will somehow become as intelligent as a human. But really, all it's doing is repeating patterns. That's what many of these systems do. Scaling up imitation, not understanding.
Exactly. And there's more. I came across a brilliant recent study by David Rosado. He tested LLMs by submitting identical CVs with the same experience and skills, changing only the name, one male, one female.
And the results?
The LLMs consistently favored the female-named candidates across various roles, which, by the way, is exactly why at JANZZ we always separate all personal information from the dataset before any matching. And even more concerning, many of the models showed a bias toward choosing whichever CV resume came first in the list, regardless of content. So they are making hiring decisions based on a position or name, not qualifications.
That's a huge red flag.
Exactly. It shows how easily the system can be misled by superficial cues. And that's the problem with using LLMs without a structured framework. They imitate understanding, but they don't have it. The truth is, many human recruiters also carry these kinds of biases and often lack the training or tools to conduct a structured, criteria-based selection process, especially when evaluating many similar candidates. This may help explain why many candidates or companies haven't questioned the often random or inaccurate results these systems produce. In many cases, they simply aren't aware of how costly such poor decisions can be over time because they don't know any better.
Which brings us to the next point. Can LLMs, and in our case also humans, benefit from ontologies?
If you inject structured ontology-based semantics into an LLM or into LLMs, you significantly improve both accuracy and explainability. For example, when used by human recruiters, our ontology makes decision-making processes more transparent and replicable. It helps identify and apply the most relevant criteria, ensuring a more objective and effective selection. In this way, ontologies not only enhance AI applications across HR tech, they also meaningfully augment human intelligence by providing deeper insights and context in specific use cases.
So instead of replacing ontologies, LLMs should be built on top of them.
Exactly. That's how you get smart, reliable, and trustworthy AI.
And that's why we are now seeing major tech companies like Amazon changing direction and investing heavily in building ontologies, right?
I don't know if they have really changed direction. That's just a guess. But if you search online right now, you find over 50 open positions for ontologists at Amazon alone. And it's the same story with many other leading tech and data companies around the world. That sure looks like a strong sign that something is shifting in how organizations approach AI.
They are starting to realize that LLMs alone won't deliver truly explainable, context-aware AI. It all comes down to ontologies. It's a long-term investment, but you've believed in this from day one, haven't you?
Without a doubt, building a detailed, high-quality ontology for the labor market isn't something you do overnight. It's taken over 1 million hours, hundreds of experts, and a ton of careful work to get it right.
It's also important to note that ontologies aren't static. They need to be continuously maintained and updated to stay relevant. The labor market evolves, new skills emerge, and job roles, titles, and descriptions change.
Exactly. A well-maintained ontology is a living system that adapts over time. Just like our brains rely on context and keep learning throughout life, an ontology needs ongoing updates to stay relevant. If it isn't continuously maintained, it can quickly become obsolete, and the AI using it will lose its effectiveness. That's why at JANZZ.technology we are always evolving our ontology so it reflects the most current trends, roles, and skills in the labor market. To use another popular phrase these days, lifelong learning also applies to ontologies.
So, for companies looking for long-term, trustworthy AI, investing in ontologies isn't optional. It's the only path to real semantic intelligence.
Absolutely. If you want systems that don't just guess, but know. Ontologies are the way forward. In a well-modeled ontology, you can understand career pathways, skills gaps, and training recommendation. It's a full ecosystem of intelligence that generic models just can't replicate.
If there's one thing our listeners should take away from this,
it's not about choosing between ontologies and LLMs. It's about grounding the future of AI in meaning. And meaning starts with people, domain experts, who know how the world really works. The fact that so-called black box companies are suddenly hiring ontologists or trying to retrofit structured knowledge into their systems says it all. They have hit the limits of purely statistical models and are starting to realize they need real semantic understanding.
that's a powerful note to end on. Stefan, thank you so much for your time and insights.
Thanks, Laura. A pleasure.
That's it for today's episode. You'll find related links in the podcast description if you want to dive deeper. If you found this conversation insightful, make sure to share it. If you're tired of black box AI making decisions you can't explain, visit JANZZ.technology. We build AI with brains and ethics. Our ontology-driven AI solutions are designed to enhance your recruitment and talent management processes. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.